A warm welcome back to GlobeTrotting. If you're new, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It would certainly mean a lot. Boeing continues to look to the future, and with that comes the requirement for innovation and a new commercial aircraft. Over recent years, there have been several mentions of innovation, and with that, new possible endeavours that could materialise into the launch of a new jet. However, for many reasons, this has yet to happen. However, as Boeing attempts to turn a corner and rebuild itself as a business, innovation is a key focus, and with that, the need to compete with Airbus and respond to airlines' calls for new planes. Now, halfway through the 2020s, and with 2030 rapidly approaching, what's the status on the next aircraft from Boeing? Well, over the last couple of years, much talk has centered around the 737 MAX replacement, with some debate even dating back to the early 2020s, you may recall, when observers believed the MAX was too far gone and needed to be scrapped due to incidents that had occurred. However, the MAX continues to now be produced, and it was such an investment that for Boeing to get rid of it entirely would have been a dramatic measure, especially with so many orders that were still left unfilled. The plane maker continues to push the jet to airlines, and when evaluating its performance metrics, despite its troubled history, it certainly does stack up for what airlines are looking to fly with, and certainly towards the competing A320neo. However, despite this, the MAX was only a re-engine of the 737NG at its core, utilising what is a dated fuselage in an attempt to compete with Airbus, many arguing the limitations of this said fuselage had already expired. With that in mind, there has always been a feeling that a replacement would arrive sooner rather than later, especially as we see technology advance quicker than ever before, and now work is in the early stages of being initiated to replace the single-aisle program. The Wall Street Journal reported at the end of September that Boeing is evaluating key flight deck designs to prepare for the replacement. With this effort still in the early stages, no formal decisions have been made yet for the upcoming type. Given that the 737 MAX is so crucial to the program, beginning the framework for a replacement is key if the manufacturer does not want to fall further behind Airbus, which is also in the process of developing its own next single-aisle aircraft too. All this follows 2024's announcement that a new commercial aircraft would be built in the company's traditional home of Washington, where over 30,000 employees reside, but a commitment would need to be made to launch the jet in the next 4 to 5 years. While the 737 MAX replacement steals the headlines in another timeline, Boeing would have proceeded with the middle-of-the-market airliner, which stole the show across the 2010s and into the early stages of the 2020s. While next-gen aircraft such as the 737 MAX and 787s were emerging as successful planes with significant efficiency, they weren't always ultimately what airlines were looking for in terms of replacement and renewal efforts. As a result, a decade ago or so, discussions began regarding the prospect of a middle-of-the-market airliner. Many would go on to dub it the 797, that would look to replace some of your 757 and 767s while fending off interest in the emerging A321neo. Prospective variants had already been outlined, which would seat roughly 220 to 270 passengers with around a 4,500 nautical mile range. Furthermore, a study by ICF International led to the belief that this aircraft would be able to establish itself in the market quite strongly, with potential interest in approximately 3,000 to 3,500 aircraft over a 20-year period based on their analysis. These estimates would vary, with other parties thinking it would be more likely around the 1,500 mark, but despite these varying predictions, the aircraft did have a market. It was just a matter of whether Boeing would act on it. With such high levels of demand for the single-aisle jet, and Airbus moving ahead with its own prospective NMA, later to be seen through the extended range capabilities of the A321XLR, many felt that Boeing could not afford to miss out on this demand. That intense interest was even visible from Delta, a major US carrier that is now, as a result, subsequently relying more heavily on Airbus to power its future. Delta expressing that desire to purchase the prospective NMA to help build its future fleet, but for ultimately more reasons than one, this did not launch and was put on hold despite that interest. Unfortunately, the move to not launch the NMA and now potential delays in launching the 737 MAX replacement and potential delays in launching the 737 MAX follows an incredibly troubled period for the American manufacturer. Headlined really by 2 fatal accidents at the end of the previous decade involving brand new aircraft, this was the straw that broke the camel's back and highlighted years of corners being cut to maximise profits. Since this moment, it has been a persistent, unfortunate downward slope where recovery at times seemed to be occurring, only to find something new emerging that highlighted the progress many thought had happened did not quite reach the levels expected. Now, in the mid-2020s, Boeing has invested not just funds but also its workforce in its business, aiming to turn the corner truly. This focus extends not only to the quality control elements of its production floor, but also to cultural aspects, addressing mismanagement and pressures that led really to the troubled teens, as you could describe it. With that being said, and factoring in all of these challenges, Boeing has not been able to commit to launching a new plane, as it stated itself, especially in the 2020s, with all of this having occurred. It's not been financially sound enough to really proceed with one either. Boeing would go as far as arguing sensibly that a new aircraft would not make sense considering existing problems that it needed to fundamentally address, from the inability to certify other models to the production floor. Boeing even said in April of this year it would pause development on the full-scale X-66 sustainable flight demonstrator, instead making adjustments to the TTBW technology, which has been highly touted as a key possible component for the next era of flight. Even in these challenging times, there appears to be light at the end of the tunnel, and Boeing is progressing slowly but surely with the replacement of the MAX, really bringing in a new era of commercial aviation that is even more efficient than the previous one. The next 5 years are going to be important for Boeing as they move ahead with the 737 MAX replacement, no doubt using the technologies and learnings from this aircraft to eventually adopt onto future ones too, like we've seen with Airbus's new engine option and Boeing's MAX and X and even 787 series. Thanks for watching, take care, be safe, and I'll see you in a couple of days right back here on GlobeTrotting.
And we'll fly.